There are moments in life when you realize the weight of a decision you've made, but you carry it anyway. You don't talk about it, you don't complain about it, you just hold it like a secret only you know. But deep down, you know you're meant to do it, no matter how heavy it feels. My name is Maya Johnson. I'm 53 years old. My hair is streaked with the silver of life's hard lessons. I've lived in Atlanta for as long as I can remember, though some days it feels like I've been here much longer than that. I work as a cashier at the local grocery store, but that's not the story I'm here to tell you today. The real story starts with my son, Jamal. He's 17 now, a senior in high school, bright-eyed and ready to take on the world, or at least he thinks he is. He doesn't know that the world doesn't always work the way you think it will, or the way you want it to. When Jamal was just 6, I lost his father, Nathan, a good man, a man who had plans for all of us. But that was before the car accident, the one that took him away from us, leaving me to raise our son alone. The day I had to tell Jamal his father wasn't coming home, it felt like my heart was being ripped out of my chest. I held him as he cried, wondering how I could fix it, how I could make this right for him. I've been trying to make it right ever since. The world has been a little different for us without Nathan. We've struggled, sure, but there's always been love. That's what I've made sure Jamal knows. Love, family, togetherness. It's the only thing I could give him when I had nothing else. After Nathan died, I gave up my job in real estate. We had a little savings, but not nearly enough to make it on my own. The thought of leaving Jamal with a sitter, or with strangers who wouldn't care for him the way I would, broke me. So, I did the only thing I knew how to do. I took care of him myself. I found a part-time job, something small, working at the grocery store down the block. It wasn't much, but it was enough to pay the bills. And in between, I made sure to be there for him. I took him to school, I cooked dinner every night, and I made sure he understood that family was everything. But lately, things have gotten harder. Jamal's getting older, and that means his needs are changing. School's more expensive. There are sports activities. He wants to go to college, and as much as I want to give him the world, there's only so much I can do with the little I have. Some nights after Jamal goes to bed, I sit at the kitchen table and look at the bills stacked high. There's a growing pile of overdue notices. The mortgage is behind. The car is getting closer to being repossessed. I try not to let Jamal know. He's smart, he notices things. I don't want him to feel any more pressure than he already does. He's worked hard for the future he's dreaming about, and I'm not going to let him see me worry. There's no point in letting him see the weight on my shoulders. He already has enough to carry. He doesn't know that when I make him his favorite dinner of fried chicken and collard greens, I'm skipping lunch to save a few dollars. Or that when we go to the park on Sundays to watch the sunset, I'm wishing I had the courage to ask Michael Turner for help. Michael is a man I met last year, a businessman who runs a successful tech company. He comes into the store every week to buy groceries, always friendly, always asking how we're doing. We talk about his business, the future of Atlanta. I can't help but notice the way his life is so different from mine. He doesn't know it, but sometimes I wonder if he could help us. If he could help Jamal get the education he deserves, maybe even give us a shot at a life we've only dreamed about. But then I remind myself that we've gotten by without help before, and we can do it again. But it's hard, isn't it, to ask for help, to admit that you can't do it all on your own. The nights are the worst. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering how long I can keep this up. Wondering if Jamal will ever know how much I sacrificed for him. Wondering if I'm doing enough. Wondering if he'll ever look at me and understand why I pushed him so hard to study, to succeed, to believe in himself. It's not just about the grades, it's about his future. It's about making sure he has the opportunities I never had. It's about giving him the kind of life where he doesn't have to worry about money the way I did. The other day, Jamal came home with a big smile on his face. He had a letter in his hand. The look on his face, I knew something big had happened. I didn't even have to ask him what it was. He jumped into my arms, shouting, "Mom, I got into Stanford." I didn't know whether to cry or laugh. The pride I felt in that moment, the relief, the joy, it felt like the world had finally given us something back. But then, the next thought hit me like a ton of bricks. College isn't free. He's going to need money. I couldn't tell him that, not in that moment, not when he was so happy. "That's amazing, Jamal," I said, squeezing him tightly. I'm so proud of you. But inside, I was already thinking of the next steps, the next hurdle. How do we get him to Stanford without a mountain of debt? How do I make sure he doesn't lose this opportunity because of me? Later that night, after he'd gone to bed, I sat alone at the kitchen table again, the letter from Stanford open in front of me. The excitement from earlier had worn off, replaced by a heavy knot in my stomach. The reality set in, but I wasn't about to tell him that. No, I wouldn't burden him with this. I couldn't. He had worked so hard for this. I would figure it out. Somehow, someway, I would make it happen. Because that's what mothers do. We sacrifice, we push through, we make it work. I looked down at the picture of Nathan on the wall. I'm doing this for him, Nathan, I whispered. I'm doing this for both of us. And as I stared into the quiet darkness of the kitchen, I made myself a promise. I would give Jamal everything I didn't have, and I would do it with love, even if it meant sacrificing every last bit of myself. Because in the end, family is everything. And as long as I have Jamal, that's all I need. The days blur together in a rush of small moments, barely leaving time for me to catch my breath. Each morning, I wake up at 6, the smell of coffee brewing in the kitchen, and Jamal's school uniform laid out carefully on the kitchen chair. I'd like to think I've gotten used to the routine, but truthfully, it's becoming harder and harder to keep up. The bills pile up on the kitchen counter, as does the weight of everything I know I need to do. Every day feels like a race against time. Jamal needs to study, and he needs guidance, but what can I guide him toward when I can't even see a way out for us? I watch him, sitting at the table late at night, textbooks spread out, his eyes focused. I know how much he wants this, how much he wants a future. I see it in every line of his face when he talks about the places he wants to go, the things he wants to achieve. He's so much like his father, determined, never backing down, and I would give anything to give him the world. But the world doesn't give, does it? You have to take it, and right now it's the world that's squeezing us tight like a grip that won't let go. The day that Jamal brought home his acceptance letter to Stanford, my heart had soared, my hopes had risen. But with it, the fear crept in. I didn't know how I was going to pay for it. We were barely getting by as it was. That night, I sat in the living room, staring at the letter in front of me. It was official. Jamal was accepted into one of the most prestigious universities in the country, but there was no way I could afford tuition. The scholarship they'd offered covered barely half of what we'd need, and that was before factoring in books, dorm fees, food, everything else that came with it. I'd done the math in my head 1,000 times, and I knew that no matter how hard I worked, no matter how many extra hours I picked up at the store, it wasn't going to be enough. It never was. The sound of the door creaking open snapped me back to reality. Jamal walked in, his backpack slung over his shoulder, his face bright with that same excitement he had when he first told me about the letter. He had no idea what was going through my mind. Mom, he grinned, his voice full of hope. Did you read it? Did you see? Stanford, I can't believe it. I'm going to college, Mom. This is it. I wanted to share his joy. Wanted to scream with happiness, but my throat tightened. I looked at him, my heart breaking, because I knew this would be the moment when my own dreams for him collided with the harshness of reality. I saw, baby, I said, my voice steady but strained. I'm so proud of you, Jamal. You've worked so hard for this. He grinned wider, sitting down beside me on the couch, pulling the letter from his backpack like it was a trophy. I don't know how I got in, Mom. I mean, it's Stanford. I was nervous about the SATs, but I guess it paid off. This is all because of you, you know? I smiled, though it felt more like a mask than anything genuine. I could feel the tears welling up in the back of my eyes, threatening to spill. The moment felt so sweet, so pure, and yet so heavy. I'd worked every day of my life to get him here. Every sacrifice had led to this point, but now I was afraid that my sacrifices would never be enough to make his dream come true. Stanford, huh? I whispered, my heart in my throat. That's amazing. It's everything we've dreamed about. Yeah, he said, still beaming. I've been thinking about what I want to do there. Maybe medical school or, well, something that helps people, you know? You always taught me that, Mom, helping people, giving back. I could see the world ahead of him, bright and full of possibility. But all I saw when I closed my eyes was the reality of the next few weeks. The financial aid office, the meetings, the phone calls, the paperwork. Where was I supposed to find the money for this? How was I supposed to tell him that his dream might be out of reach? I had to think fast. Listen, Jimal, I started trying to sound casual. This is all so exciting, but have you thought about how you'll pay for everything? I mean, there's tuition, books, living expenses. My voice trailed off, my thoughts spinning. I'm sure there are other scholarships you can apply for, right? We'll figure it out, okay? He nodded, but I could see the confusion in his eyes. But the scholarship is a good start, I interrupted quickly, but it's not going to cover everything, Jamal. We'll have to look for more resources. But inside, my stomach churned. I knew what I was saying wasn't true. The truth was, I didn't have those resources. I didn't have anything. Later that evening, after Jamal had gone to bed, I stood by the kitchen sink. The dishes from dinner still piled up. My hands were shaking as I tried to wash the plates, but all I could think about was the letter. My son was going to Stanford, but I didn't have a way to send him there. And no matter how many hours I worked, it wouldn't be enough. I couldn't let him see how terrified I was. I couldn't let him know that his future was slipping away because I couldn't give him what he deserved. I couldn't bear the thought of failing him. I pulled out the stack of bills from the drawer, stared at them for a moment, then pushed them aside. There was no point in going through them again. The numbers wouldn't change. The pressure wouldn't ease. I closed my eyes and let out a slow breath. That's when the thought hit me. Michael Turner. I'd known for months now that he could help. He could help Jamal get the education he deserved, but I didn't know how to ask him. How could I? It felt wrong. I'd seen how he lived, the luxury he had. He had everything. And here I was, stuck in this small kitchen, trying to figure out how to make a dollar stretch. But maybe that was the answer. I had to swallow my pride, had to accept that I couldn't do this on my own. I wasn't proud of it, but I was desperate. Jamal's future depended on this. I took out my phone and dialed the number Michael had given me the last time we spoke. My hands were sweating as I held it to my ear. The phone rang 3 times before he answered. Michael. My voice sounded small, unsure. It's Maya Johnson. I know this might be a strange ask, but I need help. My son, he got into Stanford, and well, we don't have the money for it. I'm not sure where else to turn. Could you help us? There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I held my breath, wondering if I'd just made the biggest mistake of my life. Would he laugh? Would he say no? Then his voice came through, calm and steady. Maya, I didn't know it was this serious. Of course, I'll help. Don't worry about it. We'll get Jamal into that school. It's the least I can do. I could feel the tears in my eyes before I even realized they were there. It wasn't relief. It was guilt. It was shame. But Jamal needed this. I had to do whatever it took. I wasn't proud of it, but I would carry this burden for him. For Jamal, because a mother does what she has to do. And if that meant swallowing my pride and accepting help, then so be it. The next few days felt like a whirlwind, a blur of moments that passed too quickly. My hands were still shaking from the phone call with Michael Turner, and though his words were comforting, they only added to the weight I already carried. He would help. He said it like it was nothing, as if money could just erase all the barriers in the world, as if it could fix what had been broken in me for so long. I kept telling myself that it was for Jamal, that this was what he needed, that I was doing the right thing. But there was a part of me, deep down, that felt like a failure. The guilt of asking for help gnawed at me, a constant reminder that I couldn't provide for my son in the way I thought I should. A mother should protect her child from needing anything outside of love, right? But here I was, leaning on someone else to fulfill what I couldn't. It was a bitter pill to swallow. Jamal had no idea. He didn't know what I was doing behind the scenes to make his dream happen. When I saw him smile that wide grin, when he talked about his future with such unshakable confidence, I wished I could tell him the truth, that I didn't know how I was going to send him to Stanford, that I was terrified of failing him. But I couldn't. He deserved better than that. He deserved to feel like the world was his to conquer, and if that meant bearing the burden alone, then so be it. Mom, you okay? Jamal asked one night, walking into the kitchen while I was staring blankly at the stack of bills again. I blinked and forced a smile. Yeah, baby, I'm good, just thinking about things, you know how it is. He frowned, studying my face for a moment, then shook his head. You're working too hard, Mom. I can help with stuff around here. I hated how he saw me like that, how he could sense something was wrong, but I refused to burden him with the weight of it all. I couldn't. He had enough on his plate with school and the pressure of his future. If he saw me struggle, if he saw me falter, what would that do to his drive? You've got enough to focus on right now, Jamal. You're going to Stanford. That's what matters. But what about you, Mom? Are you really okay? I bit my lip, heart aching at his concern, the way he always thought about me, about us. His father would have been proud of him, proud of how he wanted to take care of me. Nathan would have said the same thing, probably. He always worried about me too, but now I had to carry the load alone. I couldn't let Jamal see the cracks forming in the foundation I was so desperately trying to hold up. I'm fine, Jamal. I just need to make sure you're ready for all the new stuff coming your way. You're going to do amazing things, I know it. Jamal hesitated but finally nodded. All right, Mom, but if you need anything, you know where I am. The next day, I called Michael again, my hands shaking as I dialed his number. He answered on the second ring, his voice calm as ever. Maya, how's everything going? I'm trying to get the paperwork together, I said, forcing my voice to sound steady. But I'm not sure about a few things. Do you? Do you need any documents from me or Jamal? There was a pause. I could almost hear him thinking. Don't worry about that. Just send me what you have and we'll take care of the rest. I've already spoken to my lawyer about the funds, and we're going to set up everything Jamal needs to get there without any problems. I thank you, I whispered, overwhelmed. I don't know what to say. You don't need to say anything, he replied. I know what it's like to struggle. You don't have to do this alone. I hung up the phone, staring at it for a moment. I had no idea what I had just agreed to. Michael was giving us so much more than I could ever repay. But what did I owe him in return? This wasn't just money. It was a lifeline when I had to accept, even though it felt like the hardest thing I'd ever done. The days that followed were filled with paperwork, more calls, more back and forth with Michael's team. Jamal was oblivious to it all. He was busy with his school projects, his friends, his excitement about his future. It was hard for me to watch him so hopeful, so full of promise, while I was drowning in a sea of doubt. I wanted him to have everything. I wanted him to thrive. But as the pressure mounted, I couldn't help but wonder, was I sacrificing too much? Was I asking too much of myself and of Michael? At night, I would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, and replay every decision I had made. Michael's offer to help came with strings attached, whether I liked it or not. The more I thought about it, the more I realized I wasn't just asking for money. I was asking for a change in the course of Jamal's life. And there was no going back. The next week, Michael invited me to dinner. I was hesitant, unsure of what I was walking into. Jamal had a late study session, and I found myself sitting in the car, staring at the restaurant's glowing sign. The luxury of the place felt foreign to me, out of reach. I had never dined in a place like this, let alone been invited by someone who lived in a world so far removed from mine. I had been preparing myself for this moment all week, and yet I felt unprepared. When I walked in, Michael greeted me with a warm smile, like we were old friends. He didn't look at me with pity or with the distant judgment I sometimes felt from people who had everything. He was simply there to help. But the moment I sat down at that table, something shifted in me. The discomfort of being in a place like this, of knowing I didn't belong, settled deep in my chest. I suddenly felt small, insignificant, like I didn't deserve the generosity that was being offered to us. You don't have to do this, I blurted out, my voice shaking. I appreciate it, but... He cut me off with a soft smile. Maya, you don't need to apologize. I'm not helping you because I feel sorry for you. I'm doing this because Jamal deserves it, because you've worked hard and you've given so much for him. This is the least I can do. I swallowed hard, feeling tears prick at the corners of my eyes. I was so afraid, afraid of accepting help, afraid of what it might mean for me, for Jamal, for our future. I'd spent so many years standing on my own 2 feet, making my way through the world without relying on anyone. But now, as I sat across from Michael, I realized that sometimes strength comes from knowing when to accept a hand, and sometimes the hardest thing is to allow yourself to be helped. I don't know how to thank you, I said, my voice trembling. You don't need to, Michael said. Just make sure Jamal doesn't forget to send me his thank you note. I couldn't help but smile, but as I sat there, I couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was happening, something that would change everything. The weeks following my dinner with Michael felt like a strange kind of limbo, suspended between the worlds I had known and the one Jamal was about to enter. He seemed to float through life with that same eager determination, talking about his new life at Stanford, his dreams of becoming a doctor, and how he couldn't wait to leave. He never saw the cracks beginning to form in the foundation of my carefully constructed world. I wish I could say that I was comfortable with Michael's help, that I had come to terms with the fact that I had accepted something I couldn't give on my own. But each time I spoke to him, each time he checked in to make sure things were progressing smoothly, I felt the same gnawing sense of unease. I had been a mother who carried the weight of the world on her shoulders for so long, and now, suddenly, I was sharing that load with someone who had no personal stake in it. I wasn't sure how I felt about that, but I couldn't let it show. Not to Jamal, not to anyone. One evening, as I sat in the kitchen, staring at the stack of papers Michael's lawyer had sent me, I heard the doorbell ring. I wiped my hands on my apron and stood to answer it, half expecting it to be another delivery or another call about Jamal's tuition. But when I opened the door, I wasn't prepared for what or who was standing on the other side. It was Owen Blake, Jamal's father. For a moment, I just stood there staring at him. He hadn't been in our lives for years, not since he'd walked away when Jamal was just a baby. Not even a phone call, a birthday wish, nothing. His disappearance had been swift and clean, like ripping a page from a book you never wanted to read again. Owen? I said, the word tasting foreign in my mouth. What are you doing here? He hesitated for a moment, hands stuffed into the pockets of his coat. He was older now, but I could still see the same sharpness in his eyes, the same arrogance that had pushed me away all those years ago. I know I haven't been around, he started, his voice unusually hesitant. But I saw the news. Jamal, he got into Stanford, didn't he? I nodded, my chest tightening. Yeah, he did, but that's none of your business, Owen. Where have you been after all these years? Now you want to come back in the picture? His face flushed, and he rubbed the back of his neck nervously. I know it sounds bad, but listen, I've been thinking a lot about this, about Jamal. He's my son, Maya. I've been missing out on a lot, and I don't want to miss the chance to make it right. I stepped back from the door, feeling a rush of anger I hadn't expected. Make it right? You think you can just show up now after all these years? After you left us with nothing? After you walked away when I needed you most? He opened his mouth to speak, but I raised a hand to stop him. You don't get to come back now, Owen. Not after everything. My voice cracked with the weight of years of pain, years of struggling alone to raise Jamal, to give him everything I never had, to protect him from people like Owen. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Maya, he said quietly, his voice breaking for the first time. I'm just asking for a chance to be part of his life. He's the only family I've got left. I felt the anger twist inside me, but something else was creeping in too, something I couldn't quite name. There had always been a part of me that wondered what Jamal's life would have been like if Owen had stayed. What kind of man Jamal would have become with his father's guidance instead of mine. I hated myself for even thinking it, for feeling the wound open just a little bit wider. I don't know if I can give you that chance, Owen, I said, my voice low. But you need to talk to Jamal. He's the one you owe an explanation to, not me. He nodded, his face sinking with defeat. I'll do that. I'll talk to him. I'll make things right. I owe him that. I didn't believe him, not for a second, but I didn't have the energy to argue anymore. I didn't have the strength to keep fighting someone who hadn't been there when Jamal needed him most. I'll talk to him, Owen repeated, his voice softer now. Thank you, Maya, for letting me try. I didn't say anything as he turned and walked down the steps, leaving me standing in the doorway, the chill of the night air creeping into the house. For the first time in years, I felt the past clawing at my back, reminding me of how much I had lost, of how much I had sacrificed. And now Owen was back as if nothing had ever happened, as if everything could just be forgiven with a few words. I stood there for a long time, staring after him, my thoughts tangled and disjointed. I didn't know what this meant for Jamal, for me, for our future, but I knew that this wasn't going to be simple. It was never going to be simple. Later that night, when Jamal came home, I could see it on his face. The excitement, the hope. He was so sure of his future, so ready to take on the world. He didn't see the storm brewing just beyond the horizon. Hey, Mom, he said, walking into the kitchen. Guess what? I got that internship with the medical research team. They're giving me a stipend for the summer, too. Things are really falling into place. I smiled, tried to keep it light. That's amazing, Jamal. You're going to do great things. He sat down at the table, his enthusiasm infectious. I'm thinking about applying for the medical program early. Maybe even work part-time at the hospital while I'm at school. If I'm going to be a doctor, I need to get a head start, right? I nodded, but something inside me twisted painfully. The weight of the decision I had made, asking Michael for help, bringing Owen back into our lives, pretending that everything was fine when I knew it wasn't, settled on my chest like a heavy burden. Mom. Jamal's voice broke through my thoughts. Are you all right? I forced a smile when I didn't quite believe. Yeah, baby, I'm good, just a little tired, that's all. But inside, I felt everything unraveling. Everything was changing, and I wasn't sure if I was ready for it. The world was shifting under my feet, and no matter how hard I tried to hold on, I knew things would never be the same. The days after Owen's visit passed in a blur, each one feeling heavier than the last. The weight of everything, the bills, the decisions, the secret I was keeping from Jamal, pressed down on me until it was almost impossible to breathe. Every time I looked at him, I saw the hope in his eyes, the bright future he was determined to create, and it only reminded me of how little I had to offer. It was like standing on the edge of a cliff, knowing that every step I took closer to that future could either lift us up or send us crashing down. Jamal, of course, never noticed. He was too caught up in his own world, his dreams of Stanford, of becoming a doctor, of the opportunities that lay before him. And who could blame him? He had every right to be excited, to look ahead with hope and optimism. But me, I could only see the cracks in everything. It wasn't long before the first real sign of trouble came, an email from Michael Turner's lawyer, asking for a meeting. At first, I thought it was just a formality, a little check-in to make sure everything was progressing smoothly with Jamal's college preparations. But when I read the words again, my heart sank. The meeting was scheduled for the following morning, and the subject of the email made my stomach turn. Finalizing funding for Jamal's education. I stared at the screen, my mind racing. There was no turning back now. The arrangement was no longer just about helping Jamal with his education. Michael wasn't just a kind man helping out an old acquaintance anymore. He had inserted himself into our lives in ways I wasn't prepared for. His lawyer's email was a reminder that this wasn't charity, it was an investment. Michael was involved in Jamal's future in ways that made me uncomfortable, but I had no choice but to keep going forward because without his help, none of this would even be possible. I spent the rest of the evening trying to prepare myself. I had already agreed to the help, and now I had to face the consequences of that decision. It wasn't just about Jamal anymore. It was about the fact that Michael had become part of the very fabric of our lives. He wasn't going away, and I needed to figure out how to live with that. The next morning, I found myself sitting in the lobby of a sleek, modern office building, the cool steel and glass reflecting the light of the early morning sun. The lawyer's office was pristine, organized, nothing like the cluttered, worn-out spaces I was used to. The air was thick with the scent of fresh coffee and new leather. As I waited, I tried to calm my nerves, but it was no use. This was a world I didn't belong in, a world I had never asked to be part of. Michael had said I didn't need to apologize, but that was before I knew what I was really stepping into. I felt like an imposter, like I was pretending to belong in a space where people like me, people from our neighborhood, didn't get to sit in the same rooms as men in tailored suits and women in silk blouses. And yet, here I was. A woman in her mid-30s came out of a side office holding a clipboard. She was sharp, efficient, and professional, the kind of woman who didn't waste time on pleasantries. "MS Johnson?" she asked. I nodded, and she led me to a small conference room at the back of the building. "Mr. Turner will be with you shortly," she said, then left without another word. I sat there, the chair too stiff, the table too clean. The silence was suffocating. I kept running the conversation in my head, wondering what I was walking into. A few minutes later, Michael walked in, his face warm, his smile genuine. But the moment he sat down across from me, I could tell something had changed. This wasn't the friendly man who'd offered to help Jamal. This was the businessman, the man who had power over decisions I couldn't even begin to understand. "Maya," he said, his voice smooth but with an edge to it now. Thank you for meeting with me. I know this isn't easy, but I wanted to go over the final details of what's at stake here. At stake? I hadn't thought of it that way. I felt my stomach tighten. What do you mean, Michael? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, trying not to sound as nervous as I felt. Jamal's future, he said, folding his hands in front of him. I've made significant investments into his education, and that comes with certain expectations. I need to know that you and Jamal are fully on board with the process. We've talked about this before, but now it's time to make things official. I blinked, feeling a weight settle into my chest. This wasn't just about money anymore. Michael's help came with strings I hadn't fully understood until now. Expectations? I asked, my voice faltering despite my best efforts to sound calm. He leaned back in his chair, his eyes steady on mine. Yes, Maya, there's no point in pretending this is a one-way street. I've committed to Jamal's future, and that means I need to ensure he's making the most of this opportunity. The reality is he's going to need to perform. He's going to need to keep his grades up. He's going to need to respect the agreement we've made. I was stunned into silence. The man sitting across from me wasn't offering help anymore. He was laying down terms. Jamal's future, our future, was no longer entirely in my hands. I opened my mouth to speak, but the words didn't come. I had always been the one to protect Jamal, to keep him from harm, to make sure he didn't get lost in the world. But now, it felt like I was handing him over to someone else. I had made my choices, but I didn't know if I was ready to live with the consequences. Michael seemed to sense my hesitation. Maya, he said, his tone softening, I'm not trying to control Jamal, but we both know that opportunities like this don't come often. I'm offering him a chance to succeed, and in exchange, I need to know that he'll take it seriously. I nodded, though my mind was racing. I understand, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. There was a long pause before he spoke again, his eyes studying me closely. I'm just trying to make sure you and Jamal understand the responsibility that comes with this. It's not just about getting into school. It's about staying there, making the most of it, and I need to know that you're both committed to that. I felt the tears building in my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. I had to stay strong, had to keep going. We're committed, I said, my voice steady now. I'll make sure Jamal understands. Michael nodded, his expression softening. Good, because this is just the beginning, Maya. The rest of Jamal's life is ahead of him, and we both want to make sure he's ready for it. I stood up, my legs trembling, and walked out of the office with a sense of finality that hit me harder than I'd expected. The world I had created for Jamal, this future he had worked so hard for, was no longer entirely his. It was tied to Michael's money, his expectations, his terms. I had made a deal, and now I had to live with it. When I got home, Jamal was already sitting at the kitchen table, his books spread out, studying for his next exam. He looked up at me, his face full of hope, and for a moment I thought I might break. Hey, Mom, you okay? He asked, sensing something was off. I forced a smile, my heart aching. Yeah, baby, I'm okay. Just tired, that's all. But I wasn't okay, and I wasn't sure if I ever would be again. The next few weeks felt like an endless stream of adjustments, changes, and realizations. The reality of what I had agreed to, what I had opened the door to, settled into my bones in a way I couldn't shake. I went through the motions, making meals, doing laundry, handling the bills, but everything felt distant, like I was living someone else's life. I couldn't escape the feeling that everything was unraveling, just slightly every day. Jamal was too busy with his final exams to notice the strain in my face, in my voice. He was too focused on his future to see the weight I was carrying, and I wouldn't let him see it. When I looked at him, I saw the man he was becoming, the man who would go far, who would make something of himself, and my heart swelled with pride. But alongside that pride was the gnawing fear of how little I had left to give him. Stanford was within reach, but so was the question that kept me awake at night. What happens when we get there? I'd made promises to him, promises about a future where nothing would stand in his way. But promises meant nothing when the road ahead was paved with expectations that didn't belong to me. The pressure from Michael's side of things was constant. There were always emails, always checks to be signed, and the increasing awareness that this was no longer just Jamal's dream, but also Michael's investment. I could feel the weight of those terms Michael had laid out in his office, the weight of his expectations hanging over us like a cloud that refused to move. One evening after dinner, Jamal dropped a comment that hit me harder than I expected. We were sitting in the living room, the TV on low in the background, as he worked through his notes. His mind was still on his exams, and for a moment, I thought we could just sit there in peace, letting time pass by. "I've been thinking about it, Mom," he said suddenly, his voice steady but tinged with curiosity. "You know, you've been acting kind of weird lately, like you're carrying something heavy and you're not telling me what it is." I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. I had hoped he wouldn't notice, that he wouldn't sense the tension I'd been so careful to hide. He had always been perceptive, too perceptive for his own good, and now it seemed like there was no way to avoid the question. "What do you mean, baby?" I asked, forcing my voice to stay even. "I don't know. It's just every time I talk about Stanford, or the future, you kind of shut down like there's something you don't want me to know." His words struck me like a knife, and I could feel myself pulling back, not wanting to reveal the truth, not wanting to break him. I had spent so much of his life trying to protect him from everything, from the hurt of losing his father, from the pain of financial instability, and now, from the truth of what was really happening behind the scenes. "Jamal," I began, my voice softer now, "I'm just tired, you know how it is. Between work and everything else, I don't always have the energy to keep up. But it's nothing for you to worry about, I promise." He didn't buy it. I saw the look in his eyes, the one that told me he was thinking too much, piecing together things he shouldn't have to. "You don't have to protect me, Mom," he said quietly, putting down his notebook. "I'm not a kid anymore. You can talk to me." I felt my throat tighten. I had spent so many years making sure Jamal didn't know the weight of our struggles, keeping him insulated from the truth. But maybe it was time he knew. Maybe it was time to share the burden, even if it hurt both of us in the process. "I'm just trying to make sure you get everything you deserve," I said, my voice trembling. "And sometimes, that means making hard choices, choices that might not be easy for either of us." Jamal studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "I get it, Mom, but you've always taught me that family's everything, and that means we're in this together. Whatever happens, we'll handle it together." The words he said were so simple, but they hit me like a ton of bricks. All this time, I had been trying to shield him from the very thing he wanted to be a part of, the truth of our lives, the reality that we had to face. But what I hadn't realized was that Jamal wasn't asking to be protected anymore. He was asking to be included. He was asking to share the load. "I don't want you to think I'm not proud of you, Jamal," I whispered, blinking back tears. "I've just been trying to do the best I can. And sometimes, that means keeping things from you so you don't have to worry." He reached out, placing a hand on mine. "I know, Mom, I know, but you don't have to carry it all by yourself, not anymore." I held his hand tightly, letting his words sink in. For the first time in months, I felt the smallest bit of relief. Maybe I had been wrong about trying to protect him from everything. Maybe the only way forward was together, as a family. But as much as I wanted to believe that things could be different now, there was still the looming shadow of what Michael had set in motion. There was still the fact that, despite Jamal's bright future, everything we had was tied to someone else's terms. That night, after Jamal went to bed, I stood in the kitchen, staring at the stack of papers on the counter. There were still agreements to finalize, emails to respond to, things I hadn't fully understood when I agreed to this partnership with Michael. But no matter how many times I looked at the documents, the weight of it never lifted. I thought of Owen's visit again. I hadn't expected him to show up, to even care about Jamal after all these years. But something in the way he had spoken, so quietly, almost broken, had stuck with me. Maybe he wasn't the man I thought he was. Maybe there was a part of him that had missed out, a part that was trying to make amends, however clumsily. But as I thought about it, the pain of his abandonment flooded back. The phone calls he never made, the birthdays he never remembered. I couldn't forget the way he'd chosen his career, his life, over his son. And even now, after all this time, I wasn't sure if I could ever forgive him. The truth was, I wasn't sure how to navigate any of this. Michael, Owen, Jamal, it all felt like too much, too fast. But one thing was clear, no matter what happened, I couldn't protect Jamal from the weight of the world forever. He had to face it just like I did. The only thing I could do was show him that no matter how hard it got, we would face it together. Tomorrow, I would have to sit down with Michael's lawyer again, answer more questions, sign more papers. But tonight, all I could do was sit in the quiet of our home, feeling the weight of the choices I had made, and wondering if it was enough. The days blurred together in a rhythm of uncertainty. I went through the motions, always pretending that everything was fine, that nothing had shifted beneath the surface. But in truth, everything had changed. My nights were filled with restless thoughts, and my days were spent with the quiet, nagging awareness that something was about to break. Jamal was oblivious, as always. He threw himself into his studies, his internship, his future, everything he had been working toward for the past few years. Every time I looked at him, I saw the same unshakable drive in his eyes. He was determined, full of hope and ambition, and there was nothing I wanted more than for him to see that future come to fruition. But that future was starting to feel more and more out of my control. I wasn't just a mother anymore. I was a manager, a mediator, a player in a game I didn't fully understand. Michael's help came with expectations, and those expectations loomed over us like a cloud. Every time I looked at Jamal, I saw him moving closer to a life that wasn't entirely his own, and the guilt gnawed at me. Then came the phone call. It was a Thursday evening just after dinner. Jamal was at his desk working on his college essays, and I was cleaning up the kitchen when my phone buzzed. It was a number I didn't recognize. I hesitated, then answered. Hello? Maya Johnson? The voice was smooth. Professional. This is Lance Mitchell from Turner Technologies. I'm Mr. Turner's personal assistant. I'm calling to confirm your meeting for tomorrow at 2 p.m. at our headquarters. I blinked, confusion washing over me. Wait, what? A meeting? Tomorrow? Yes, Ms. Johnson. Mr. Turner has requested that you come in to finalize some documents regarding Jamal's education plan. He would like to discuss a few last-minute details in person. We've also arranged for some legal representatives to be present. I stood frozen in the kitchen, my hands trembling. I hadn't expected this, not like this. It was supposed to be simple, just paperwork, signatures, and the quiet, detached exchange of resources. But now it seemed like Michael was pushing for more. I could feel the walls closing in. I didn't realize it was scheduled for tomorrow, I said, my voice strained. I'll be there. Great. We'll see you then. The line went dead before I could respond. I stood there for a long moment, the phone still pressed to my ear, my thoughts a tangle of fear and confusion. Jamal's future was happening right in front of me, but it didn't feel like it belonged to him anymore. It felt like I was just a passenger, being pulled along by forces outside of my control. I set the phone down and walked into the living room, where Jamal was sitting at the desk, furiously typing away at his computer. The glow of the screen illuminated his face, but it also highlighted the growing strain in his expression. He was exhausted. No one could keep this up forever, not even him. Hey, Jamal, I said softly, walking over to him. I've got to go into the city tomorrow for a meeting. It's about your tuition and the paperwork. You don't need to worry about it. I'll handle it. He looked up from his computer, his face lighting up with that familiar smile. Stanford stuff, right? That's awesome, Mom. You're really handling everything. Thanks for doing all this for me. I know it's a lot. I froze for a moment, my throat tight with emotion. He had no idea what was happening behind the scenes. All he saw was his mother, working tirelessly to make sure he got what he deserved. But what if what he deserved wasn't just a shot at a future, but a life that was truly his, untouched by the strings that were pulling at it from every direction? Of course, baby, I said, forcing a smile. Just get some rest tonight, all right? You've been working hard. Yeah, I will, he said, turning back to his laptop. But we're gonna have to talk about the summer plans soon. I think I can get a spot in that research lab at the hospital. I'm just waiting for confirmation. My heart swelled with pride, but at the same time, a small knot of anxiety tightened in my chest. The more Jamal worked, the further away he seemed from the child I once held in my arms, the little boy who didn't yet know what the world would throw at him. He had his eyes set on the stars, and I was afraid that in reaching for them, he might forget the ground beneath him, the one thing that had always kept him steady. "I'll make sure we figure it all out, Jamal," I said, my voice a little softer now. "You just focus on your work." I left him in the living room, his focus already back on the screen. He had no idea what was coming, what tomorrow's meeting with Michael would mean. But I did. I could already feel the pressure of it, the weight of the decisions that were about to be made, decisions that would shape not just Jamal's future, but my own. The next day, I found myself standing in the elevator of Turner Technologies' glass and steel headquarters, feeling out of place. My jeans and sweater seemed so insignificant against the backdrop of polished marble floors and sleek, modern designs. I took a deep breath and tried to steady my nerves. I had to be strong for Jamal. But even as I stood there, I knew that this meeting wasn't just about paperwork. It was about everything I had given up to get him here, and everything I might have to give up still. The elevator doors opened, and I was led down a long hallway to a conference room. The door opened to reveal Michael Turner sitting at the head of a sleek glass table. He looked up as I entered, his expression unreadable. "MS. Johnson," he said, rising to shake my hand. "Thank you for coming. Please have a seat." I took a seat across from him, my stomach tightening. "I assume you've had time to review the documents we sent?" he asked, his voice smooth. "I've gone over them," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "We need to finalize Jamal's scholarship agreement today," Michael continued, his eyes scanning the paperwork. "But there are some other aspects of the agreement I'd like to go over. Jamal's performance, his commitment. I need to be sure we're all on the same page moving forward." My chest tightened. "What exactly are you asking, Michael?" He leaned back in his chair, his gaze never leaving mine. "I'm asking you to ensure that Jamal understands what this opportunity requires. He needs to be committed, not just to his studies, but to the expectations we've set for him. We can't afford to have distractions, Maya. You understand that, don't you?" I felt my heart race as his words sank in. This wasn't just about tuition anymore. This wasn't just about Jamal's future. This was about ownership, his ownership of Jamal's life, and I had no say in it. "I understand," I said quietly, my voice strained, but inside I was screaming. This wasn't the future I had promised him. This wasn't the dream I had fought so hard to give him. Michael slid a final document across the table, his finger pointing to the bottom line. "Sign here and we'll move forward," he said, his tone final. I looked at the paper, the words swirling in front of me. This was it, the point of no return. Everything I had worked for, everything I had sacrificed, all led to this moment. But as I stared at the paper, I realized I wasn't just signing away my own freedom. I was signing away Jamal's too. I reached for the pen. And as I did, I couldn't help but wonder if I had just signed his future away too. The days that followed the signing felt like a blur of tension, uncertainty, and an ever-growing sense of foreboding. I went through the motions, trying to keep up the facade of normalcy. But everything was shifting beneath me, and no matter how hard I tried to ignore it, I knew there was no turning back from the path I had set us on. Jamal, of course, didn't see any of it. He was focused on his studies, on his internship at the hospital, on the future that lay ahead of him. He didn't know what had happened at that meeting with Michael. He didn't know how deeply I had been torn, how much I had sacrificed to keep him on this path. And maybe, in some ways, it was better that way. Maybe I had done the right thing by protecting him from the weight of all the decisions I had made. But there was a nagging feeling inside me, something I couldn't shake, that told me he would eventually find out, just as I had always found out the hard way. That afternoon, as I sat at the kitchen table, sorting through bills I didn't have the money to pay, I heard Jamal's voice from the living room. He was on the phone with one of his friends, talking animatedly about the research program he was hoping to join at the hospital. I listened as he spoke, his excitement palpable, and for a moment everything seemed right. He was happy. He was on his way to achieving everything he had ever dreamed of. But then his words took a sharp turn. "Yeah, my mom's been acting weird lately," he said, casually. "Like she won't talk about the Stanford stuff anymore. It's like she's hiding something from me, you know?" I froze, my breath catching in my throat. Jamal didn't know that I was listening. I didn't know whether to let him keep talking, to pretend I hadn't heard, or to confront him about it. But the idea of confronting him, of finally opening up and telling him everything, terrified me more than I was willing to admit. She's always been so strong, you know? He continued, completely unaware of my presence in the room. But lately, I've been seeing this change in her. Like she's been carrying something I don't know about. I swallowed hard, my chest tightening with guilt. I wanted to walk in there and tell him everything. I wanted to say, Jamal, I'm doing this for you, even though it feels like I'm losing myself in the process. I'm trying to give you the life you deserve, even if I don't know if I can make it happen. But I couldn't, not yet. Not when he still had so much hope in his eyes. Not when he still believed everything was going to be fine. I stood up quietly, walking out of the kitchen, careful not to let him hear me. The last thing I wanted was for him to know that I had overheard. He didn't need to see me in this light, not now, not when I had already failed him in ways I wasn't ready to face. That night, as Jamal sat down to dinner, the atmosphere in the house was heavy. The silence between us was thicker than it had ever been. I could feel him watching me, studying me like he was trying to piece together a puzzle I wasn't ready to let him solve. Mom, he said after a long pause, his voice quieter than usual. Are you all right? I looked up from my plate, meeting his eyes, and in that moment, I felt a pang of regret deep in my chest. Jamal was so much like his father in this way, the way he could see through me, the way he could read me even when I didn't want him to. He wasn't just my son, he was the person who had always been able to understand me better than anyone else. I'm fine, Jamal, I said, forcing a smile. Just a little tired, that's all. But he wasn't buying it. Mom, he pressed, his eyes narrowing slightly. You've been saying that for weeks now. What's really going on? You don't have to keep pretending like everything's fine. I felt my heart skip a beat. I could feel the truth bubbling up inside me, fighting to break free. He was asking for it, but I wasn't ready. Not yet. I'm just trying to make sure you're ready for everything that's coming, I said, my voice soft. You've got so much ahead of you, Jamal. I just want everything to work out for you. He stared at me for a long moment, his eyes searching mine as though he could see the cracks forming just beneath the surface. And then, with a deep sigh, he pushed his plate aside and stood up. I know you're trying, Mom, he said, his voice a little softer now. But I'm not a little kid anymore. You don't have to keep carrying everything on your own. If you're struggling, I'm here, okay? You don't have to do this by yourself. The words hit me harder than anything he could have said. I didn't know what to do with them, didn't know how to respond without breaking down in front of him. I know, I whispered, my voice shaking slightly. I want what's best for you. That's all I've ever wanted. He nodded, then walked over and placed a hand on my shoulder. I know you do, Mom. I know. For a moment, everything seemed to still, like time had frozen in that simple gesture of understanding. But then the weight of everything hit me all over again. The choices I had made, the decisions I had hidden from him, the paths we were both walking down that we hadn't fully understood. The next morning, I stood in front of the mirror in my bedroom, staring at my reflection. I looked like the same woman I had always been, but I felt so different, so lost in the web I had tangled myself in. I had done everything for Jamal, sacrificed everything, and yet here I was standing at a crossroads. What did it all mean if the very thing I was trying to give him was slowly taking him away from me? I didn't have the answers, but I knew one thing: it was time for the truth. I had kept him in the dark long enough. Jamal deserved to know everything. I couldn't protect him from the world anymore, not when it was already knocking at our door. I took a deep breath, wiped my face, and walked out of the room. I needed to talk to him. We needed to face what was coming together, whether I was ready or not. As I walked down the hall to his room, I felt the weight of every decision, every sacrifice I had made. And I knew with absolute certainty that the hardest part of being a mother wasn't the giving, it was the letting go. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that presses in on you, that wraps around you like a heavy blanket. I stood outside Jamal's door, my hand hovering over the knob, the words I had rehearsed in my head feeling distant, unfamiliar. I didn't know where to start, didn't know how to say it. I had been carrying this secret for so long, letting it fester until it had become something bigger than I was, and now there was no avoiding it. Jamal deserved to know the truth, the whole truth, no matter how hard it was for me to say. I took a breath and knocked gently on his door. "Come in, Mom," came his voice from the other side, warm and inviting. He had no idea what was coming, but I could feel the weight of the moment pressing on me with each second that passed. I pushed the door open slowly and found him sitting at his desk, his textbooks and notebooks scattered across the surface. He was hunched over, his face buried in a page of notes, his pen moving furiously across the paper. For a moment, I just stood there watching him. He looked so focused, so determined, and it made me ache. I had done everything I could to make sure he had every opportunity, every chance to succeed, but now I had to let him in on the truth. I had to let him see the cracks in the foundation, the ones I had been hiding for so long. "Jamal," I said softly, my voice barely above a whisper. He looked up, his expression softening as he saw the look on my face. "What's up, Mom? You okay?" I swallowed hard, my heart racing. "Can we talk?" He pushed his chair back, the wheels scraping softly across the floor. "Of course, what's going on?" I took a step closer, sitting on the edge of his bed. I hadn't planned on this moment. I hadn't planned on being so vulnerable, so exposed. But now that I was here, I knew there was no turning back. "Jamal, I've been keeping something from you," I began, my voice shaky. "Something that I should have told you a long time ago, and I've been trying to protect you from it, but I don't think I can anymore." He raised an eyebrow, his gaze shifting from concern to confusion. "What do you mean, Mom? What's going on?" I took another deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. "I've been making decisions for you, without fully telling you everything, and I'm sorry. I thought I could handle it on my own, but it's gotten too complicated, too heavy." He sat up straighter, his eyes narrowing slightly. "What are you talking about? Is this about Stanford? The tuition?" "Mom, you've been working so hard to make sure I can go. You don't have to worry about that anymore. Michael's helping us, and I know you're doing everything you can." I shook my head, trying to find the right words. "It's more than just the tuition, Jamal. It's everything. Michael's been helping us, yes, but it's not just about paying for college. There are strings attached to it. Things I didn't want to tell you because I didn't want to burden you. But now I can't hide it anymore." Jamal's expression shifted, a flicker of unease crossing his face. "What do you mean, strings attached?" I hesitated, unsure of how to explain the situation without overwhelming him. But I couldn't back down now. I had to tell him the truth. "Jamal, Michael, he's been more than just a benefactor. He's been involved in the decisions about your future in ways I didn't realize until recently. There are expectations he has for you, for your performance, and I've been going along with it because I thought it was the only way. But now I see that I've been putting you in a position where your future isn't entirely yours. It's tied to his success, his money, his terms." The silence that followed was deafening. Jamal just stared at me, his mouth slightly open, his eyes wide with shock. "Wait," he said slowly, trying to process what I had said. "You mean Michael's been controlling everything? My future? My education?" "I don't want to say he's controlling everything, Jamal," I said, my voice breaking. "But yes, he's been involved in the agreements I made. He has expectations about your performance at Stanford, about what you will achieve. And I've let it happen because I didn't know how else to make sure you could go." Jamal stood up abruptly, pacing back and forth across his room. I could see the frustration, the confusion building in him. "Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you say something before? I thought you were doing this for me, but now it feels like I've been a pawn in someone else's game." His words cut through me like a knife. This was the last thing I wanted for him, to make him feel like his future wasn't his own, to make him feel like he was being manipulated. But the truth was, I had let it happen. I had let someone else decide his path because I thought it was the only way. "I was trying to protect you," I whispered, my voice thick with guilt. "I thought if I could just get you to that point, get you into Stanford, that it would all work out. I thought if I just kept my head down and kept pushing forward, you would have a future. But now I realize I've been making decisions without talking to you. I've been keeping things from you because I didn't want to burden you with the reality of what we were facing." Jamal stopped pacing and turned to face me, his expression a mixture of anger and hurt. "You don't get it, do you? You didn't just make decisions for me. You made decisions for us, for both of us. You let someone else control my future without even asking me what I wanted, and I don't know if I can trust you anymore." The words hit me harder than anything I had ever felt. I had spent so long trying to protect him, trying to give him everything I never had, that I had lost sight of what he really needed. It wasn't just money. It wasn't just an education. It was his autonomy, his ability to make his own choices. And in trying to give him everything, I had taken that away from him. "I'm sorry, Jamal," I whispered, my heart breaking. "I thought I was doing what was best for you, but I see now that I was wrong. You deserve more than this. You deserve to make your own decisions, your own future." He stood there for a moment, staring at me, the anger and confusion slowly melting into something else, something quieter, something that hurt even more. "I don't know what to do with this, Mom," he said finally, his voice softer now, but laced with pain. "I don't know if I can go through with this, if I can keep accepting help when it comes with strings attached, if it's not even really my future anymore." I felt tears prick at my eyes as I looked at him, seeing the weight of the decision on his shoulders. "You don't have to keep going through with it, Jamal. You don't have to do anything you don't want to. I'll support whatever choice you make, even if it means stepping away from everything I've worked so hard to give you." Jamal sank down onto the bed, his face in his hands. "I just don't know what to believe anymore," he muttered, his voice breaking. "I don't know who's really helping me and who's just using me to get something out of it." And in that moment, I realized that the truth I had been holding back for so long had finally come crashing down. I had shielded him from the reality of our situation, hoping he would never have to face it. But now he was seeing everything for what it was: a tangled web of good intentions, broken promises, and the harsh reality of what happens when you don't have the power to control your own future. I sat down beside him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "I'm sorry, Jamal. I didn't mean for this to happen, but whatever you choose to do, I'll be here, no matter what." He nodded, but the pain in his eyes told me that things would never be the same between us again. And in a way, I knew that was the price I had to pay. For letting someone else decide our fate, for trying to protect him at the cost of his independence. The truth was out now, and it was no longer just mine to carry. It was Jamal's, and what he chose to do with it was his decision. But I would support him, no matter what path he took, because that's what mothers do. They love, they sacrifice, and they let go, even when it hurts more than anything else. The silence that followed Jamal's quiet breakdown in his room was suffocating. The air in the house felt heavier than it ever had before, and no matter how much I wanted to reach out to him, to fix it all, I knew I had no right to. What could I offer him now but my regret? What could I say to make it better when the truth had come out in such a raw, painful way? I spent the night in the living room, staring at the dim light of the lamp, feeling like an intruder in my own life. Jamal had retreated to his room, where I imagined he sat in the same silence, sorting through his own emotions. He didn't speak much after that conversation. We didn't speak much at all. In the morning, I woke to the sound of Jamal in the kitchen, moving quietly as he prepared breakfast. I stood in the doorway, watching him as he cracked eggs into the frying pan, flipping them with practiced ease. He always had a way of making everything seem effortless. But today, the movement felt mechanical, like he was just going through the motions. "Morning, Mom," he said, his voice distant but polite. He didn't look up as he spoke, focused instead on the pan in front of him. "Morning, baby," I replied, unsure of what to say next. I wanted to apologize again, wanted to tell him how deeply sorry I was for everything, for making him feel like his future wasn't his own, for allowing outside pressures to weigh so heavily on him. But there were no words that could take back the way I had failed him. Not this time. "I've been thinking," he said, setting the spatula down and turning to face me. His eyes were clear, but there was something hardened in his expression. "About everything we talked about last night." I nodded, my chest tightening. "I understand if you're angry, Jamal. I've been selfish, trying to protect you in ways that don't make sense. I never meant to take away your choices, your future. But the truth is, I was scared. I didn't know how else to get you to where you wanted to go. I thought I was doing the right thing, but now I see it was all wrong. I'm sorry." He was quiet for a moment, just standing there studying me. The weight of the silence between us felt like a tangible thing, something we could both reach out and touch. But neither of us knew how to break. Finally, he spoke, his voice steady but full of a depth that surprised me. "I'm not angry, Mom. I'm disappointed, but not in you, in myself. Disappointed in yourself? I asked, confused. Yeah, he said with a sigh, running a hand through his hair. I've spent so much time focusing on the future, on what comes next, that I never really stopped to think about how I got here, how this was all being paid for. I've always been so focused on the dream of Stanford, on becoming a doctor, on helping people, that I didn't see the cost of it all. I didn't see how much of it wasn't really mine to begin with. I stood there, feeling my own heart tighten as he spoke. Jamal, I never wanted to make you feel like you were just a pawn in some game. I wanted you to have the future you've always dreamed of. And I thought maybe, if I just did what was necessary, you'd have everything you needed to make that happen. But I didn't ask for that, Mom, he said, his voice quieter now, more thoughtful. You did this all without talking to me. You thought you knew what was best for me, but you didn't let me choose. I had no say in any of it, and now I don't know where that leaves me. I could feel my throat tightening, the words lodged there, unspoken. He was right. I hadn't given him a choice. I hadn't trusted him enough to let him decide his own path, to let him have control over his own future. I had thought I was protecting him, but in reality, I had been controlling him. I'm sorry, Jamal, I said, my voice breaking. I should have given you more credit. I should have trusted you with the truth. I didn't want to burden you, but I see now that it was unfair. You deserve to make your own choices. Whatever happens, you have the right to decide what you want for your life. He looked at me for a long time, the lines of his face softening as he considered my words. I know you were trying to protect me, Mom, but I think I need to step back from all of this, from the pressure, from the expectations. Maybe I need to figure out who I am, not just what other people expect me to be. I've been running so hard toward this dream, but I don't even know if it's mine anymore. Maybe I need to make that choice for myself. The weight of his words hit me harder than I expected. This wasn't just about a scholarship or an internship. This was about his autonomy, his right to claim his own future. And in that moment, I realized that what I had been so afraid to give him was the very thing he needed the most, the freedom to choose. I took a deep breath, my hands trembling slightly as I reached out to him. Jamal, I don't want to stand in your way. Whatever you choose, I'll support you. I don't care if it's Stanford or something else. All I care about is you being happy and you being true to yourself. You don't owe anyone anything, not me, not Michael, no one. He nodded slowly, a faint smile tugging at his lips. Thanks, Mom. It was the first time in a long while that I felt like we were finally speaking the same language, finally understanding each other in a way we hadn't before. It wasn't going to be easy, and I knew there would still be a long road ahead, but for the first time in months, I felt a glimmer of hope. Jamal wasn't just my son. He was his own person, someone who could make his own decisions, who could find his own path. And my job wasn't to steer him or push him in any direction. My job was to love him, to support him, and to give him the space to find his own way. The silence between us shifted, no longer suffocating, but filled with the promise of something new, something real. Jamal sat down beside me, his eyes softer than they had been all week. You know, I've been thinking a lot about what I want to do, not just with college, but with my life. I'm not sure where it's all going yet, but I know I don't want to get lost in someone else's dream. I want to make my own. I smiled, a small, bittersweet smile, but one that held more understanding than I had ever felt before. That's all I've ever wanted for you, Jamal, to make your own choices, to be your own person. We sat there together for a while, just being in the quiet of the moment. The weight between us had lifted, but I knew it would take time for both of us to find our way. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like we were on the right path. The path that was ours to choose. And no matter what came next, I knew that we would walk it together. The days following our conversation were filled with change, the kind that doesn't announce itself with fanfare or fireworks, but quietly takes root in the heart. Jamal and I spent more time talking, really talking, about what we wanted for our future, his future. He didn't make any immediate decisions, and I didn't press him. Instead, we both learned to sit with the discomfort of the unknown, to live in the uncertainty of what was to come without the pressure of expectations clouding our choices. One morning, a few weeks after the tension had passed, I woke up early to find Jamal sitting at the kitchen table, a cup of coffee in his hand, his notebook spread out in front of him. The sunlight was just beginning to filter through the window, casting a soft glow over the room. There was a peace in the air, a kind of quiet calm that I hadn't felt in so long. "Hey, Mom," he said when he saw me, his voice still a little groggy, but with a hint of something new, something lighter. "I've been thinking." I smiled and sat down across from him, pouring myself a cup of coffee. "What about? I think I'm going to defer my acceptance to Stanford for a year," he said, looking up at me, his eyes serious but also calm, as though he had already come to peace with the decision. "I want to take some time to work on myself, figure out what I really want, not what everyone else wants for me. I've spent so long chasing this idea of success, and I think it's time I learned what it means to truly live my life on my own terms." I felt a rush of pride mixed with something else, a sense of relief. He was finally stepping into his own, making the decision that was right for him, not for anyone else. The weight I had been carrying, the fear that I was losing him or that I had somehow failed him, began to melt away. He had found his voice, his own path, and that was all I had ever wanted for him. "Jamal," I said, my voice soft, "I'm proud of you. I think that's the smartest thing you could do. Whatever you choose next, I'm here for you every step of the way." He smiled, a real smile this time, not one of obligation or expectation. It was genuine, the smile of someone who was finally letting go of the weight they had been carrying for far too long. "I know, Mom. I know you're always here, and that means more than anything." We sat together for a while, just drinking our coffee in the quiet of the morning. There was no rush, no deadlines to meet, no decisions to be made. For the first time in a long time, it felt like we were exactly where we needed to be, together, in this moment, finding peace in the unknown. In the weeks that followed, Jamal took a job at a local restaurant, working part-time to save money for his trip. He started volunteering at a community health clinic, something he had always wanted to do but never had the time for. He found joy in things that didn't have to be tied to a degree or a specific future. And it was in those small, quiet moments that I saw him become more of the person I had always known he could be. The person he was meant to be. As for me, I began to breathe again. The pressure, the guilt, the fear, it all began to lift. I focused on my work, on taking care of the house, on making sure that Jamal had the space to grow and make his own choices. We didn't have a perfect life, and we never would. But we had each other. And that, I realized, was enough. One evening, as we sat down to dinner, Jamal turned to me, a thoughtful expression on his face. "Mom," he said, "I've been thinking a lot about everything. About how hard you worked to get me here, about how much you've given up for me. And I just want you to know that no matter what, I won't forget that. I'll always appreciate everything you've done. You're the reason I'm here today, and I'll never take that for granted." I felt my heart swell with pride and love for him. He had grown so much, not just in age, but in wisdom and understanding. And in that moment, I knew that everything I had done, everything I had sacrificed, had been worth it. "Thank you, Jamal," I said quietly, my voice thick with emotion. "That means everything to me." As the months passed, things slowly settled into a rhythm. Jamal's future was still uncertain, but in that uncertainty, there was freedom. He had the time and space to explore, to discover who he truly wanted to be, not who anyone else expected him to be. And that was the greatest gift I could ever give him, the freedom to choose his own path in his own time. And me, I learned how to let go. I learned that sometimes the best way to love someone is to step back, to allow them to make their own decisions, to support them in their choices, even if it means watching them stumble. Because that's how we grow, how we learn. The truth was, I had done the best I could. I had loved him with everything I had, and I would continue to do so for as long as I lived. But now, it was his turn to live his own life, to make his own choices. And I would always be there, no matter where that path led. As I watched Jamal drive off that afternoon, heading toward whatever future he was going to create for himself, I realized that I had given him the most important thing a mother could give: the freedom to live, the freedom to choose, and in that I found peace. To all the mothers out there who have sacrificed everything for their children, to all the children who have been given the opportunity to choose their own path, I want to say thank you for being a part of this journey. Life isn't always easy, and it's not always perfect. But as long as we have love, as long as we have each other, we can face whatever comes our way. Thank you for reading. May you all find peace, love, and happiness in your lives, and may your families always be a source of strength and joy. Stay healthy, cherish your loved ones, and remember that the greatest gift we can give each other is the freedom to choose and the courage to live. With all my love, Maya.